Actual predictions. As you can tell by the title, this video is going to be about my prediction for the 2028 Republican primary with these 5 candidates. And as you all know, this is very, very early. This is about 3 years before anything actually happens in the primary. You probably won't see any of these candidates announced for at least another year, probably a year and a half, if any of them choose to run. These are the 5 that I think would run and would probably have enough traction to stay in for Iowa, which will be the first primary. As we can see here, this is going to be the calendar. It is 2024, but there probably won't be too many major schedule changes with that. So these are the 5 candidates that I think will run. JD Vance, obviously the vice president elect. I think that he will run in 2028. He is definitely the favorite. Then we have Nikki Haley. She got a little bit of support, and I think she is kind of a base down the Republican Party from 2024. Brian Kemp and Glenn Youngkin. I think that they will run just to get their name out there. A lot of people run to get their name out there. That's why we saw people like Vivek Ramaswamy run in 2024 to really just get their name out there, get their name, like to become a household name. And it worked for Vivek Ramaswamy. I think it's very possible. It works with Brian Kemp and Glenn Youngkin too. I probably should have mentioned this in my 2028 Democratic primary prediction because a lot of these candidates that run there, even though they know they have not a good shot of winning, they still run just to get their name out there, and I think Christie runs. This will be his 3rd presidential run, and I think he'll just probably run again just for the heck of it. So our first one is the state of Iowa, and as we can see here, the Republican primary, their delegate allocation is like really weird. They have a bunch of different systems, so this will show us how to do that. Our first state is Iowa. It is completely proportional. It is proportional, as we can see here in this little key. It is proportional. There is no minimum threshold, and there is no winner-take-all threshold. So it's just going to be based off delegate count. I think that we probably see JD Vance win by a pretty solid amount here. I think Nikki Haley could probably garner maybe 17-20% of the vote. Brian Kemp might be able to get 10%. Christie maybe 5%. And we'll just play around with the margin a little bit. I think Glenn Youngkin's pretty well known around the country, so we probably might see something like this. I mean, JD Vance is from the Midwest. He's from Ohio. I think that'll definitely help in Iowa. They have very similar politics, definitely. So, yeah, this probably seems about right. This will give JD Vance a huge win. He wins 45% of the vote. He wins 18 delegates. Then Nikki Haley gets second with 9 delegates. Glenn Youngkin third with 7. Brian Kemp fourth with 4 delegates. And Christie fifth with 5 delegates. So that puts JD Vance in the lead, followed by Nikki Haley, Glenn Youngkin in third, Brian Kemp in fourth, and Christie in fifth. So our next race is the New Hampshire one, just about 8 days later. And that one has a minimum threshold of 10%, and there's no winner-take-all threshold. Brian Kemp being from Georgia, I'm not sure if he gets there. He'll probably get maybe 8 or 9%, especially considering that he only got 10 in Iowa. So I don't think that he will probably make the delegate threshold. Christie, I think, will. I think Glenn Youngkin will. Although Christie, he really just doesn't have much momentum at this point. He got 5% in Iowa, very low amount. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he dropped out after Iowa and endorsed someone like really any of these 3 candidates. Probably Nikki Haley, though, because she has the most traction right now. I'll say Nikki Haley. I honestly think Nikki Haley could win in the New Hampshire primary. She came very close to winning in 2024, probably within like 8 or 10%, and that was with Donald Trump. I honestly think that she is going to be able to pull off a win. Well, there could be a lot of vote splitting with Glenn Youngkin for sure. So I'll leave it as a tie for now, 6-6 between Nikki Haley and JD Vance. Glenn Youngkin gets third with 5. Then Christie fourth with 3, and then Brian Kemp last place with 9. He doesn't get any delegates because it was 10%, yeah. And then his delegates will be allocated to the other ones, so we'll give 1 to JD Vance and 1 to Nikki Haley. And that keeps JD Vance in the lead. He's now at 25 delegates. Nikki Haley's 16. Brian Kemp is in third, or Glenn Youngkin is in third with 12. Christie is in fourth with 5, and Brian Kemp is in fifth with 4. At this point, I think that Christie probably drops out of the race, as you can see, January 23rd, and I think he'll probably endorse Nikki Haley. I think that he thinks that she'll have the best shot of winning and beating JD Vance, so he'll probably drop out maybe a few days later. We'll say January 25th, so now he is out. I think Brian Kemp does stay in for South Carolina. I think he might think he has a chance of winning because he is his home state is right next door. So the next state is Nevada and the Virgin Islands on February 8th, so a few weeks later. What is that? In Nevada, it is proportional again, so there's no threshold at all. I think Brian Kemp could probably get maybe 11%, and that's probably a little bit optimistic for him at this point. Glenn Youngkin might be able to get 19, and assuming Nikki Haley Nikki Haley's team is actually on the ballot this time. I think that she might be able to get. I think she'll have some momentum coming off of New Hampshire, especially. It depends on whether she wins the popular vote in New Hampshire, really. Um, we'll say that Nikki Haley gets 7 delegates, and then JD Vance with another win, especially after Christie's endorsement. So JD Vance gets his third win. That's 11 delegates for him. Nikki Haley has 7, Glenn Youngkin 5, and Brian Kemp 3. So that keeps JD Vance in the lead at 36, Nikki Haley at 23, Glenn Youngkin 17, and Brian Kemp at 7. So then we have South Carolina here. This will be, oh yeah, the Virgin Islands. I forgot about that. How do the Virgin Islands do their? It doesn't even show the Virgin Islands. We'll just say it's proportional because they really don't matter that much. We'll say JD Vance gets 5, Glenn Youngkin and Nikki Haley get 2 because we don't really know how the Virgin Islands is going to vote. It's kind of a random territory, not too important when it comes to the Republican primary. Then we have the South Carolina primary on February 24th. This is really make or break for Brian Kemp. He needs to do well here if he wants to stay in the race, as he is extremely far behind any of the other candidates. And I think he does okay. I think maybe he'll get 18%. I think he'll really be banking on this state, trying to get a lot of money. We'll give him 20%, putting a lot of money into the state. I think Glenn Youngkin does okay, but this is also Nikki Haley's home state. I still think she loses. I'm gonna say JD Vance wins here by about 4 because we did see Nikki Haley do worse in South Carolina than New Hampshire in the 2024 Republican primary. And also, we have Glenn Youngkin and Brian Kemp kind of splitting the vote from her. I do think JD Vance pulls out a very narrow win by about 4%. And that puts JD Vance in the lead with 58. He's now won all 4 primaries. Well, New Hampshire was a tie. And then Nikki Haley is at 40, Glenn Youngkin 27, Brian Kemp 17. I think that Brian Kemp will drop out after this. I really don't think he has a path after South Carolina, so we'll see he drops out maybe February 26th, about 2 days after the primary, we'll say. And now there's only 3 candidates left. Moving on to the next state of Michigan, just 3 days later on February 27th. I think that we probably see, so just 3 candidates left. I think Glenn Youngkin does pretty well here. I still think Nikki Haley's going to beat him out. And one thing that we've seen in every single primary is Nikki Haley has beat Glenn Youngkin in Iowa. She beat Glenn Youngkin in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, in Nevada. Every time Nikki Haley has edged out Glenn Youngkin, and I think that she will be able to do it again. And I think after this, we could see Glenn Youngkin drop out. I still think JD Vance gets a pretty big win here. I don't think Brian Kemp really endorses anyone yet until there's actually a finalized nominee. And we'll say we might see something like this. I think Nikki Haley could do all right in Michigan. We'll balance it out a little bit for Glenn Youngkin. We'll say it's something like this. 25 for JD Vance delegates, 17 delegates for Nikki Haley, and 13 delegates for Glenn Youngkin. JD Vance now has 83, Nikki Haley 57, Glenn Youngkin has 40. Then we have Idaho and Missouri. I think JD Vance does. Oh, I didn't actually check the delegate rules for Michigan. Oh, yeah, Michigan. Oh, and South Carolina is not proportional either. I completely forgot about that. South Carolina is not proportional. It's based off congressional district. So sorry, I'm going to backtrack on that. I completely forgot about that. So I think that we will probably see, I'll say Brian Kemp manages to win 1 congressional district. Each congressional district is 3 votes, 3 delegates, and the winner take all. So I think there's 7 congressional districts, and then winner take all takes the rest. So for example, let's say Brian Kemp wins 3 congressional districts, and then JD Vance wins 4, so Brian Kemp would get 9, and then 4 would be JD Vance would get 12, and then the rest would be allocated to the winner. I think Brian Kemp could probably pull off a win in 1 congressional district. We'll say Nikki Haley gets a win in 2, and then JD Vance would get the rest of the delegates. And then in Michigan, I think Michigan is just proportional, except for they have a winner-take-all threshold of 15. So yeah, we'll keep it at the same as it was before, so probably something like this. I think that after the Michigan primary, I think that Glenn Youngkin probably drops out at this point. He's gotten 3rd place in pretty much every single primary, so I think he'll drop out maybe the day after on February 28th. And that makes it a 2-man race between JD Vance and Nikki Haley, and this is a showdown just like it was in 2024. JD Vance is the clear favorite, however. Then we have Idaho and Missouri. In Idaho, the delegate allocation laws, it's the same thing, proportional, similar as Michigan, with a 50% winner-take-all threshold. I think that JD Vance easily gets there, above that 15%. And in Missouri, it is a similar thing. It's also 50%. So I think that JD Vance will get every single delegate there. So now we can see the gap is really widening between JD Vance and Nikki Haley. And at this point, there really isn't too much room for Nikki Haley to lose at this point. Then we have the District of Columbia on March 3rd. There's no District of Columbia, I guess. Oh, no, there is. 50, so yeah, it's a congressional, or not congressional, it's winner take all after you get 50%. I think Nikki Haley will win here. That is a pretty big delegate boost for her, 19 delegates. Then we have North Dakota. North Dakota is, it's like a convention thing. They only do it at the convention, and I think that I think they just give it to JD Vance here. I don't think they do voting in the Republican primary. It's really confusing with the convention thing with these two states, North Dakota and Wyoming, but they're not going to be too important. I do think JD Vance will probably get their delegates though. And then we move on to Super Tuesday. At this point, Nikki Haley is faced with another decision, similar to what she had in 2024, where she is very behind in delegates. JD Vance is 222, and Nikki Haley is 67. Now, last time, when she stayed in, there was a lot of backlash from her, and Donald Trump has kind of managed to alienate her. She's kind of alienated herself from the Republican Party by saying all these things about Donald Trump. So does she want to do that again? Does she want to does she want to stay in it for Super Tuesday, see if she does any better? At this point, she is doing better than what she was doing in 2024, not by much. She is still losing, but she is doing better. I think that she'll probably stay in just to try to continue to grow her base in the Republican primary, maybe to have a run in 2036 or something, assuming JD Vance doesn't run again in 2032. So yeah, I think that she'll stay in for Super Tuesday, but I think it'll be a very tough decision for her. Then in Alabama, we'll see what so now we're on Super Tuesday, March 5th. Alabama, we have a proportional 20% minimum threshold, 50% winner take all. JD Vance gets all their delegates. Then we have our next state of Alaska. It's proportional. I think that Nikki Haley does pretty well here. I still think that she loses by a pretty wide margin, probably about 20%. I still think JD Vance does win here in Alaska. Then we have the state of Arkansas. In Arkansas, it is same thing, minimum threshold 15%. Winner take all 50. JD Vance easily wins this state. Then we have California. In California, this is also based off congressional district, I'm pretty sure. I think Nikki Haley does it right here. It's really a wild card state. Nikki Haley definitely underperformed expectations in 2024. So it's possible she does that again, but I think that might have just been because of Trump. We'll give Nikki Haley 15 delegates out of this state. We'll say that she wins a few congressional districts here and there, but JD Vance still dominates. Well, we'll give her a few more. We'll say she wins 21 delegates. So JD Vance still wins a big win in California, and now look at this delegate margin: 476 for JD Vance, 99 for Nikki Haley. I think she had 93 or 95 after the 2024 Republican primary, so she's already doing better, but still losing by a very wide margin. Then we have Colorado, which is a winner take all. I actually think that Nikki Haley can pull out a win here. She lost here very narrowly in 2024, and I think because she's doing better and it's not Donald Trump, it's a different candidate for the first time, and at this point it would be, 12 years. I think Nikki Haley can pull out a win in Colorado, but very narrowly. And then we have Maine. Maine was really underperforming for Nikki Haley. I do think that JD Vance wins here. The threshold, but it still has a winner take all of 50%. So I do think that JD Vance pulls out a win in Maine. Then we have Massachusetts. Nikki Haley was also very close. It's also a winner take all state. I think that, or if you get above 50%, when there's two candidates in the race, pretty much every single race, someone will get 50%. So Nikki Haley, I think, wins all of Massachusetts delegates. Then we have in the state of Minnesota, it's an 85% winner take all threshold. I think that JD Vance wins here, but not by a huge amount. We might see like a 56-43 split in the state of Minnesota. Then we have North Carolina right next door to South Carolina. It is also proportional, completely proportional. So I think that Nikki Haley maybe gets, we'll say 38%. JD Vance wins here by a pretty solid margin. Then we have the Oklahoma primary, which is 15 and 50%, so just winner take all above 50. JD Vance wins there pretty easily. Then we have Tennessee, 20 and 67. It is Tennessee. Yeah, it's Tennessee. I think that in Tennessee, I think Nikki Haley will definitely get 20%. I could see her, well, what she get in North Carolina? 38, and then Arkansas, I don't know. We'll say that she gets about 34% of the vote. JD Vance still wins here. At this point, he has a lot of momentum. which is almost enough. Is it 67%? It is not quite 67%, so JD Vance does get all of the delegates, but he still wins. Then we have Texas. This one's very important. And JD Vance wins here. I think JD Vance gets above 50%, which means he gets all 162 of those delegates. Yeah, it's 50% threshold, which means that JD Vance now has 807 delegates to Nikki Haley's 242. And then we have Utah. In Utah, we like in 2024, Nikki Haley was supposed to win in Utah, or was supposed to be very close. Donald Trump still won here, and Utah really does not like Donald Trump in the Republican Party. He lost in the 2016 primary, and it was very close in 2024, but Donald Trump still managed to outperform expectations. I still think JD Vance wins here. Long story short, so I think he does get above 50%, which does mean that he wins all of the delegates there. Now he's at 847. Nikki Haley only 242. Then we have Vermont. In Vermont, it is a 20 and 50. Nikki Haley probably wins here. She did win in the 2024 Republican primary, brings her up to 259. Then we have Virginia, our final state. It's proportional. I think this one's very close. It was pretty close in the 2024 primary. I think JD Vance comes out with a very narrow win by probably about 4%. And yeah, that's the end of Super Tuesday. JD Vance has 872 delegates. Nikki Haley's 282, Glenn Youngkin 32, Brian Kemp 10, and Christie 5. At this point, I think Nikki Haley drops out of the race. I really don't see a path for her to win, and I don't think she does either, so we'll say she drops out on the same day she did 4 years before this, on March 6th, still with nearly triple the amount of delegates that she had last time, and JD Vance goes on to clinch the nomination after this. He manages to win every single other state because Nikki Haley has dropped out, and probably would win every single delegate as well. And then the final delegate count is, let's see here. JD Vance has a lot of delegates, and JD Vance gets 2,138 delegates. Nikki Haley's 282, Glenn Youngkin's 32, Brian Kemp's 10, and Christie's 5, which does mean that JD Vance gets probably about, 85%, maybe 90% of the delegates in the Republican primary, with Nikki Haley only winning in Colorado, Massachusetts, Vermont, and a tie in New Hampshire. So if you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers. There's no by the election now, so just try to get to 500 subscribers. I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.